Welcome to Chik Chat, the podcast where the girl with many titles talks about life, the good and the bad, and everything around it. We're going to sit, chat, share life stories and experiences, from business to relationship. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Chik Chat Podcast. I am joined today by Orla. How are you doing? And hello.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I am okay. I feel like we have a lot to talk about what's going on in the world. It's going to be interesting to see how we're going to get that into 40 minutes. But I've made lots of changes in how I live my life and what I'm committing to. So I feel hopeful today. How are you?
Oh, that's exciting. Yeah, I'm all right, to be fair, because I actually think in this one, so how we normally do it is we start with like our challenge or, sorry, thank you.
Hi, Dee.
Or says hi. Starts with challenge or tip of the week, and then normally we check in the middle. But I think the conversation we're going to have, that check-in is going to be this whole conversation. So yes, yeah, we're just going to skip that middle bit, and then we'll end with the win of the week still. But yeah, how am I? I think hopeful is a really good word. I think I've been in this weird like limbo that's been like, well, what am I like? How am I feeling actually? Because honestly, like traumatic stuff's been going on in the background. Never mind, just in the world, and it's one of the. It's reminded me a lot of the pandemic, where it was like you kind of just have to keep going until one day you wake up and everything just seems okay again. Like that's so I'm still finding like happy moments and like crying over like tiny little things, but then I'm getting angry about stuff. I'm choosing to isolate sometimes. Like I've got a load of messages to get back to people because I'm just like, do you know what? Things are just draining. So yeah, I'm good. I'm surviving. I think that's a good way. Hopeful but surviving.
Yeah, I mean, so we're both in Belfast. You're a Black woman. 2 weeks ago, I don't know about you, but my son, who's also Black, couldn't leave the house.
Yeah.
And I will never experience that. And it really made me reassess a lot.
Yeah.
So whenever I see the really brilliant support that was given in that week to Kumo,
yeah.
What happens now? What's happening today? Are people having the conversations? Are they checking in on their friends? Like checking in is brilliant. Like how can we do better as white people? And that's something that I'm really fascinated and researching and learning and paying forward in how I can do better as a white person, because we contribute to, white supremacy every single day. I've gone right in here. I didn't mean to, but I do think.
I love that though.
Do you? So I just think with everything that's going on in the world, with the genocide in Palestine, with stuff that I feel people around me just going like, oh, it is really bad, isn't it? It is. How can we make change? How can we make change with our kids? How can we make change with ourselves? Like, how can we really make sustainable change and push back on the narratives that are just everywhere?
Yeah.
I don't know what you think.
I was actually going to say, because obviously I know you personally anyway, so introduce yourself to everyone and tell them what you do, because that bit won't make sense until they know who you are and what you actually do.
Okay, so my name is Orla McKeating. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a single, white, cisgendered, able-bodied mother of a multi-heritage boy called Elliot. So I live in Belfast. I grew up in Belfast during the 80s and 90s, so during the Troubles. I lived actually in a mixed area, and when I say mixed, in those days it was Catholic and Protestant. Some people still consider a mixed marriage a Catholic and Protestant one, but we moved. And so until very recently, I didn't really think that growing up in that kind of environment had affected me at all. But now, I suppose, looking at what's going on in Palestine, especially, it was our norm to be stopped going into boots, going into town by soldiers with guns. Like, that is not acceptable.
Yeah.
It definitely must have had an impact. And I was brought up in a really Catholic family, which is brilliant. Like, I definitely identify as a Catholic person. I do feel safe when I go into a chapel. I don't go to mass every week. There's a lot of things within the Catholic Church that I actively push back on.
Yeah.
And one of the big Catholic values was that you don't have sex before marriage, and you definitely don't have a baby before marriage. So you do not become an unmarried mother. I'm sure you're familiar with the mother and baby institutions that were set up in Ireland, north and south. The first one was set up in the early 1900s, and the last one closed, I believe, in Belfast in the year 2000. So when I was 18.
Wow.
So I know, right? So that narrative of that's not what you ever become. So whenever I became pregnant with my son Elliot in 2012, I knew obviously that I was going to have a mixed race or multi-heritage child, but I didn't think about raising a black son in the world. All I thought about was, I'm a single mom. I am scundered. What am I going to do? I failed. But when I had my son, I noticed the lack of representation in the books that we read. I noticed the lack of representation of characters and heroes that looked like him and of families that looked like ours. So I became quite fascinated about the impact that would have on
Yeah.
him and on other underrepresented groups. So I did a TEDx in 2019 about the stigma of single parenting and race issues in Northern Ireland. And on the back of that, people got in touch for book lists because I talked about representation and I didn't have any. So I set up,
by the way, it's incredible, absolutely incredible.
Thank you. So I set up Still Our Eyes Diversity Storytelling with a friend Anna at the time. And it was literally a passion project. We just met in person every week in Belfast. We created, like, I always try and create trusted spaces in all the work that I do.
Yeah.
I don't know that I agree with the word safe, because who am I to decide what's safe for you, what's safe for someone else? Do you? Because I don't know what someone's going to say. Do you know what I mean?
I think the way you're so intentional about everything, and that because you even hear you talking about like Still I Rise, and I think I try really hard with these because the people I get on the podcast, it's because you inspire me. But as you're talking about all of that, even with a trusted space, for me, you've created a trusted space in different variations, down to the point where there's a set of books you gave me for my niece, and she's grown up seeing representation, but seeing, like, it was a book with like amazing women with different backgrounds. And it was only a few weeks ago where I was working in Dublin and I got a video call. Like, I thought it was my brother, and then I saw it was my sister-in-law. So I was like, well, for my sister-in-law to be calling, either something's wrong or my niece wants me. So I left, went, and she got her first bonnet. And she was so excited about having her first bonnet. And I only started using bonnets a few years ago. It wasn't like this had been, I'm also learning. So even for me, when you talk about Elliot and the spaces you're trying to create, how, like you said, what's safe for one person might not be for someone else. But also, sometimes we don't know that we are creating a trusted space, because for her to want to ring me was because she's seen me and my mum. So she wanted to be like Auntie Chick and Grandma. And honestly, it made me cry, because I was like, I didn't think that little tiny thing would mean so much to her. But even in like the books that she reads, like, she absolutely loves reading, the things that she does, she's such a well-rounded person. But like you said, when you're thinking about, like, me and G now having these conversations all the time of, we will have a mixed race child. We've not thought about the things we're seeing through Eliza, and the things like I've seen through like you guys that talk about all this with children, especially in Belfast. Even our child's experience is going to be different to their cousins that are living in England or around the world. So what is a safe space? A safe space to the ones in England wouldn't be a safe space potentially to our child. We're having to teach Eliza about here so that just she can navigate whatever. And she's only 2.5, so obviously you're not going to go into like anything too deep. But yeah, I think that when you grow up in a world where you're like, oh, the people around me are good, you just assume people around you will be good, not what we actually end up seeing.
And is it always the good people who are actually contributing the most? Because if I talk about racism and I make people feel uncomfortable and I talk about white supremacy, and actually even the Belfast riots, I also feel like calling them race riots gives a suggestion of it's a race problem, but it's not. So I was calling it white supremacy terrorism. It's a mouthful, but that's what it is. But white people will never be called terrorists, really. It's, but anyway, So you're right. You're so right with that. And it's just intentionality. We're all learning and we will get it wrong. You'll get it wrong as a parent. I get it wrong as a parent all the time. And navigating the different identities within your family and within your community, even your community where you live in Belfast is
Yeah.
probably quite different to where all of those things. And I just so firmly believe that if we can create a space where we're comfortable having the comfortable conversations and we're accountable to our thoughts, our words, our actions,
Yeah.
I mean, wouldn't life be a little bit easier?
Yeah.
Because,
No,
yeah, go on.
like on your end as well, you have a son. So
Mm,
even a black son, that's a completely different story to, I'm talking about Eliza, as a female in this world and as a mixed race child that is female, how she will walk out of this house, her mum's house, if we have a daughter, would be completely different to a son. I saw Maureen yesterday was talking about, and
mm.
Maureen's been on the podcast, so she was talking about her fear for her kids going back to school because just because things look like they've calmed down doesn't mean that that's going to be the case in schools. And I know that you've had an experience with dealing with all of that, and that's something that genuinely as well. I read what she put and I thought, oh my god, I really didn't think about children going back and how parents having to navigate that.
It's just bananas. Like white supremacy doesn't sleep. It's always alive. We're always contributing to it. And it is uncomfortable. And sometimes I do feel like all I talk about is the negative. But I think that the education system isn't equipped to deal with this now. I understand that. We are so 93% segregated, so 7% integrated in Northern Ireland, which is problematic as it is, because a lot of children won't even meet someone from a different faith
Yeah.
till they're 18. But I think it's what I love about Maureen is she puts things out there and she amplifies it as a black woman living in a very predominantly white Belfast. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of, and yeah, you're right, like talk to any parent, and I'm preaching to the converted here, but like any parent of a black person will
Yeah.
have had to have these conversations or will have navigated it, unfortunately. And it's for me, it's kind of the more we talk about, have these conversations, the more we talk about it.
Yeah.
And I've worked out that the most impactful way of doing that is the way we're doing it now, is saying, well, look, have you thought about, I did some work with a school, a post-primary school actually, outside Belfast.
Mm.
And it was an amazing workshop, Chick. It was like, we did it. We learned 3 stories. So we did 6 story sessions. We listened to used the stories to hear about experiences and thoughts and musings, and then used that to write a storybook. And it was originally meant to just be 1 storybook, but we ended up getting 3. So 1 on an LGBTQ plus experience, 1 on anxiety going from primary to post-primary, and
Wow.
the 3rd one was on a really positive immigration story. And whenever we started talking about culture and identity and what that means and who we are and how it shows up in our lives and in our communities, a couple of the girls are Muslim. They moved over from Sudan and it's their story. And it really is a really positive one. I'll send it to you actually whenever I finish it. But
Nice.
they did the artwork themselves, so we just need to put it together.
Oh.
But the school, so they talked all about Ramadan and how, they actually do Ramadan. So they were like, it's just
Yeah.
really exhausting for us. Like we go into school and the school just didn't realize, and how would they,
Yeah.
that a lot of their pupils were coming in being exhausted. They're not working to their potential, and that just lacks equal opportunity.
Yeah.
Tiny things like that.
Yeah.
So the teachers were like, flip, right, brilliant. Did an assembly on Ramadan. The whole school's aware of it.
Yeah.
Whether everyone listens in assembly is a different matter. We've all been
Yeah.
there. But just little things like that are huge things, because those girls felt seen, they felt heard, they felt valued, and they felt supported. And that's all
Yeah.
it takes, How difficult is that?
Yeah. And you know what? I also love the way, because I was talking, so me and G were talking about this, and we did like our own podcast talking about race riots, political protests, blah blah, and even the way that you've broken it down in terms of white supremacy. And it's been funny because I'm very select about the conversations I have with these things, because especially during Black Lives Matters, I just got so drained, and I just thought, do you know what? Not even that it wasn't on me; it was just a lot to deal with, and people questioning your experience. But like even the way that you said about a trusted space, everyone has a different experience. So going through school, when I talked to G about my experience, my best friend growing up was Muslim. So I got firsthand to see what that was like before then moving to a college that was predominantly with Asian people of different types of faiths, but a lot Muslim. So even there, my experience was different, but it doesn't, like, I can see some of those changes that I grew up with seeing normal happening here. And like you said, a lot of it, like, yes, the schools might not be equipped to deal with all of that right now, but it doesn't mean that little things can't be done to just show people that, like my cleaner always says, and I absolutely love her because she's got two kids that, well, she got three, but two young kids, and they are amazing. And she always talks about the fact that she explains to them that, right, you've got two eyes, someone else has two eyes, someone else has a nose, they have a nose, like you have a nose, sorry, and all these little things. So if you do see differences, because she asked me at the beginning, like, am I okay to say this or ask you these types of questions? And I was like, yeah, because she's one of those people that cares so much about saying the right thing that straight away you know that you're not doing this and you're not doing it out of malice, and you're doing this to be able to educate your kids at home as well, but you're still learning. And I applaud that because I'm the same. Growing up in England, I did not know about the riots, not the riots, sorry, the everything that came up to the peace process. And even after that, what then Belfast did. And my dad explained whenever, like, I was coming to visit at first, I would say the troubles happened, but yes, there's peace now, but is it peace? Learn how to navigate, look it up, read, because if you don't, you'll end up catching yourself in something you don't want to be caught up in. And for me, what frustrates me when some of these things are happening is, I said to G that for me as a Black person, I chose to stay here, to buy a home here. This is my community. So when I see people then that have also chosen to do the same thing, then also say, oh, Belfast, oh, this is terrible. I love that people check in on you, but for the people here as well, I think people forget what the optics look like for anyone else. We weren't brought up, taught about this. So when you then perpetuate that Belfast is dangerous, Belfast isn't safe wherever you go, blah, 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 every area is going to have somewhere like that. And there are all these little things that I just go, as, like you said, as a human being, when we sit here and have these conversations, whoever wants to get offended will get offended no matter what we say. But this is our experience and our stories of where we've seen these things happen in different phases. So when people choose not to listen to that, you choosing not to listen to that because of a prejudice, because you're racist, because you just don't like another, or are you choosing to do that because you just are afraid of the unknown? And even that brings its own questions of, okay, then who are you then talking to? Who are you asking the questions? Are you going to Google? Are you reading news articles? Like, there's so much. Like, I'm going on a ramble, but it's just because I know there's so much that you do and have done. And I think you go so, it's not even above and beyond, because you're also doing this for yourself and for Elliot, but it's not that difficult to read on both sides, to ask some questions on both sides. And I don't understand why more people kind of just don't allow themselves to have some of those uncomfortable conversations, because for a lot of people, you might say something that's maybe slightly not too kosher, but you're not going to offend someone when you're trying to learn. And I think that maybe in society, there's a part of it where people are so scared to say stuff and ask questions because they're going to look bad. Whereas actually, I think we need to foster that trusted space to be able to go, oh, okay, actually, yes, I didn't understand this before. This was my view, but I do get it now. And I think that what you do with Still I Rise, from such a lower level in terms of like how young the kids are, I think stuff like that has such a massive impact. But how do you choose? How are you going to educate those kids and like those families?
So I think, is that the question? Like, how do you navigate that,
Yeah.
educating kids and families? So I worked in corporate diversity, finished yesterday. What I will say is, when we work with kids, it's so easy.
Yeah.
Because they don't have the fear that we're conditioned to have. They don't have the fear of saying the wrong thing, of doing the wrong thing. And I will say, the word allyship is very overused and very underactioned. It's kind of cool to like, it's cool to be an ally.
Yeah.
I prefer the word advocate, right? And the main kind of thing with being an ally or an advocate, whatever you are, is being uncomfortable. Of course, it's uncomfortable. We're literally like, I'm in a white women and anti-racism group, and we constantly talk about the stage of grieving
Yeah.
whenever you're grieving the world that you thought existed, but actually,
Yeah.
it's completely different. We've all been totally shafted. Like
Yeah.
we're all feeding into this. In terms of children and education, I'm there as much for the children as the adults. So I'll go in and I'll work with early years right up to primary, even in post-primary, and I will see pennies drop with the adults as well, because I always use those really simple stories. And it is just kind of creating the conversations where it's impossible to say the wrong thing, where they can ask the most ridiculous question ever, and where we have the curiosity nearly and the empathy
Yeah.
to be able to check in and nearly normalize those conversations together,
Yeah.
and kind of realize how powerful things like representation really is and how much it matters. I did a session with the school couple of months ago, and I kind of had a blank canvas. So we're like, do whatever you want. You know, this is the demographics of the class. And I was like, brilliant. I'm going to do a session on Palestine, and I am going to amplify the culture, the history, the traditions.
Yeah.
And I read these amazing books. And there was one particular book, and it's called Homeland, My Father Dreams of Palestine. And I read this book, and there was a boy from Palestine in the class. And so in Arabic is their first language, obviously. And then there was another boy whose first language is Arabic as well. And I said one of the Arabic words in one of the books, and he's like, your Arabic's rubbish. And I was like, it absolutely is. Does anyone want to come up and help me with the Arabic parts? It's a little boy from Palestine. Come up, help me, read the book, brilliant, even better, like that empowering piece as well. And you know, it's great for me to read about Palestine, but it's not my lived experience, it's not my culture. I'm nearly an outsider reading it. Did not want to whitewash it or anything.
Yeah.
He came up, did brilliant, sat down again, and I got a email from the teacher after and was like, he's never talked in the class, never mind talk in front of the class, thank you so much.
Oh.
And I was like, this is just a perfect, that wasn't me. That wasn't what I brought to the room.
Yeah.
That was an action of, this is this child's culture. This
Yeah.
is what that's his identity. How
Yeah.
can we empower every different person in the class, especially the ones that aren't represented in the world
Yeah.
around us?
Yeah.
And it's those tiny things. And I know for a fact that every adult that works with children, when we know that, we're going to do it.
Yeah.
And there is access to books. It is getting better. Learning resources are getting better. And I will say, because you were mentioning there about like why people are so afraid of people who are different, especially in Northern Ireland. And it is ignorance. Like, look at what the media feeds us. Look at what we read. Look at the language in the media, in society, in kids' books even as well. So the stereotypes, the anti-Black messages in children's books, you'll have seen it, where Black is associated with anger, with darkness, with evil. It's like, and I see it everywhere now, to the point where I'm like, I nearly wish I didn't see as much as I see, because straight away, like, right, how do we amplify this without nearly pointing the finger? The Gruffalo is a really popular book. I'm sure you've read it to your niece.
Yeah.
Do you know do you know where it actually came from?
No.
Sorry in advance.
Go on.
So it was actually originally it was a Chinese fairy tale. So it was fairy tale written Chinese folklore, and Julia Donaldson took it and appropriated it into an English. I don't. It's Julia Donaldson English, and has written the Gruffalo, and it is a great book. But there's never been any accountability for that.
Oh, that is wild, because my niece is obsessed with Julia Donaldson.
We all love it.
Yeah.
We still have it in our house, but it's just that. Who is the voice telling the story? What is the experience? And just kind of being aware of that as we bring up our kids. And it doesn't mean don't read the Gruffalo.
Yeah.
But it's like, look, this book's amazing. And did you know this is the original Gruffalo book? And it was written in Chinese. And this is so it's quite fascinating. But kids are our future. They're our future leaders, they're our future decision makers, they're our future CEOs. And who are the main caregivers? It's women. So we have it's up to us. Our silence is violence. And where I can scream that and where I can take action in that, that's what I'm doing, because the world's imploding. It's imploding. Like, we need to do better, for our kids.
Do you know, I love that as well, because even in it's so funny because I guess I have to look at this also from the opposite point of view, because
Mm-hmm.
if me and G have a kid, he's
Mm-hmm.
going to be staying at home with them as well. So
Mm-hmm.
even in terms of, so one of my clients sent me a video, and it was about like, it was some little like folklore thing, and there was a thing that I've been joking in there going, be a wife, not a knife. So then I was going, did he send that to me because he thought it was interesting in terms of how it's been put together and the story behind it as a woman? Or did he send it to me as a businesswoman, knowing that it's going to be my partner staying at home? Because there are all these things that I have to navigate even before we have kids, and go, people already have this notion. Whenever me and G go anywhere that there are kids absolutely love him, and people always comment on how good he is around children, and he just has kids and dogs, animals in general. There's just, I don't know, whatever presence or
An
whatever he
amazing
needs.
sign. You have a keeper there.
Yeah, absolutely. But he's just, even to the, like, Eliza just will absolutely freak out and go loopy. Like, he'll do something like put his thumb up, and she'll start running around and doing that. But I love that. And I think I've grown up in a family where it's not that the women do women's jobs. So the joke growing up was that I was the man of the house, because I did anything to do with DIY between my house and my auntie's house. They'd wait for me. So whilst I've grown up in that little insular, it's okay to not want to cook, to not want to do the traditional stuff you're supposed to do as a woman, as a black woman, as a Zambian woman. There's now this other side of it where I'm going, great, I figured all that out as I've grown up. My mum still struggles sometimes. I'm noticing as me and G decide what we're doing, even though they brought us up that way, it's like there comes a certain point where she goes, oh, this is going a little bit too far. Whereas I'm going, yeah, but you set this up for me to be able to think this way. So I need to be able to navigate what people don't understand in a way that makes sense to them. But now I feel like I'm having to justify why I should be able to go out and work and be the breadwinner versus G staying home if that's what he wants. But as a dynamic, like, we look at our relationship as a business. We check in every single month and we have the uncomfortable conversations. We talk about money, race, what's currently going on. Living in Belfast, again, we live in a mixed area. And I was saying to him that it made me laugh because, again, my experience of what was going on with the riots, whilst people weren't safe, I went to the shops one day and I could just, because I'm very big on like energy, and I think that's why sometimes I remove myself from situations, because it just it does it's if it's negative energy, it drains me. And I went there and I remember thinking, everyone is being overly nice. Like, people are really nice around my area anyway, but just going out of the way, which was really, really nice. And then I felt the change shift. So I went to meet my friend Debbie, and we were only at the top of Lisbon Road. It was so quiet. But I remember then feeling a bit like, because again, when I moved to Northern Ireland, I could have gone a week without seeing another person of colour, never mind another black person. Whereas now it is so multicultural in such a great way. But then I find myself going, what have I been learning over these past few years? Because, like, what is it that's making, I was walking around and I was like, right, I'm not feeling safe, but am I not feeling safe because of what I'm seeing on the news? Like, I have to dissect where some of these things are coming from, which is why I love G as well, because we will sit and have these conversations and he'll go, like, even talking about like Palestine, for example, like, you've talked about this so naturally, but in a way where you go, like, he always says to me, it's not about what you put out there to show people, oh, this is who I am as a person. How do you live your day-to-day life? And the reason that you inspire me is because I see that you back up what you're saying with how you live your life. So I then check in with myself and go, okay, where is this feeling coming from? Because we all have prejudice. Am I being prejudiced because I'm seeing someone that's different, I'm not used to seeing in Northern Ireland? Is it because of things I've seen on the news, or is it just because I'm a woman? And as I'm walking, I'm looking round going, right, where's my car? Where am I walking? It's quieter than it normally is. So even to dissect all of that, I think there's an element where sometimes maybe we also don't know ourselves enough to be able to check in where that fear comes from. Because that point there of being a woman, as women, every single woman I know has some kind of horrific story, will put precautions in place in terms of when they leave the house to when they come back. When I started dating again, I'd message my brother every little thing I was doing and I was planning during the day, and just all these little things I was going, it is crazy I'm having to do these things as an adult woman, and it's not gonna change. So I feel like, yeah, there's a lot to it as well.
Yeah, and you know where my bias comes out the most? Dating.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. And I've only really started it again. And actually, I hope that I'm the you 2 years ago, whenever you did all the solo dates. And then
Yeah.
because I just look at used to and I'm like, how did she like online date and actually find someone amazing? Because I'm just like, come on. Anyway, that's a whole other podcast. But it'll show for me if I match with someone of a different faith, of a different culture. It's I see my biases and it's like, oh, should I be careful about the should I be? And then I catch
Mhm.
myself on. Great conversation started though. It's
Yeah.
great because and then the assumptions then of me as a white blonde woman with blue hair.
Yeah.
No, not with blue hair, with blue eyes. Like there's been assumptions made towards me that are like, yeah, I mean, assumptions that are not correct at all
Yeah.
because of what I look like and because of what people see on porn sites, let's be honest, or
Yeah.
they look like me. Does
Yeah.
that mean that? No, it doesn't. But anyway, so I think and that's it. It's like checking in on our own biases and our own assumptions because it's easy whenever we're in comfortable places. It's easy whenever I'm with people who know me and I feel comfortable with me and all that. But it's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah. It's funny that you even mentioned the dating one. I actually think that one we are going to leave. And I wanted to get
Yeah,
you on so we could have this conversation and then we can have specific
do.
ones. But the dating one specifically as well, because on my end, this is me in Northern Ireland, predominantly white. Again, having those people that have these assumptions of whatever they see online, whatever they choose to watch, asking questions where you go, what gave you the balls to even ask that? Or
Right.
think this is
Right.
okay. So again, because I always say this as well, and I said so I was talking to my dad last week, and I said to my dad, just thank you for being the person that you are, because my dad is not perfect, and yet he makes so much effort to make me feel seen and heard. And I said to him that when I started dating again 2 years ago, I could have easily got myself down the path that would have just been destructive for the sake of let's do this for the plot. And again, even dated people that wouldn't have eventually been good for me. And I remember sitting there and thinking, I've watched my friends make decisions that just haven't served them. And here I am watching, for my dad to bring up my brother the way that he has. I have my dad that I can go to about anything, but obviously sometimes I don't want to go to him about absolutely everything. I then have my brother that knows absolutely everything about me. And then G's come into this. And like I was saying to G as well, that as well, I'm grateful for my dad, but my dad doing everything. When I look at my niece, that's when I see, because she is surrounded by doting men that do things for her already. That's her normal. She will grow up seeing that as well. Like for me, it got to a point where I was like, why would I expect someone or beg someone to buy me flowers when I'm taking myself out on these solo dates? I'm buying myself flowers. I'm treating myself. My dad does this for me. My brother will just randomly send me money and be like, go wash your car. I saw a picture, it looks terrible. Get yourself a takeaway, those little things. And for her to grow up like that, I think even when we have these biases, I think the men as well that we're around and the conversations we have with the men around us, I think there's a lot that women accept because it's like, oh, it's good enough. But I think I made a decision for myself to go, I don't just want good enough. I want to be, because I was loved, I was. It just wasn't always in the healthiest way. Except this time I went, well, I can either be on my own or I can find someone and wait out for that type of person that is gonna help me find the right community as well. And when we have kids, that they're gonna see what I've seen growing up, but even better, because they're not gonna have to, they'll cry over boys and girls and whatever else. But the things that we can't control, fair enough. But for the things that we can, it's that safe space, it's that trusted space, depending on where they are, to be able to understand that any questions you have about anything that's anyone that's different, anything that's happening that's different, that you've got people that you can go to, and it's not just your mum and dad. That you've got people that you can have in your little community. I look at my friends, I look at the people around me, and I just go, you guys are so inspiring, because I know that if I don't know something, I can pick up the phone and ask these questions to people that will have genuine and honest answers. It might not be what I want to hear, but at the same time, like, that's where we're starting from. So I do think even the dating part of it, as frustrating as it is, there are still people out there, but it's
Oh yeah.
just sifting through all that crap.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly that. And I do think once you realize that, like, you have everything you need.
Yeah.
We can get our flowers. We can, like master dating, I call it. Whenever you just go out with yourself, you go to the cinema, and it's great. Um, but yeah, that's where it all shows up. That
Yeah.
is where it all shows up. You
I
think,
feel
I always think like I've progressed, and then something will happen. I'll be like, damn it, never stop learning, damn it.
But I think it's the more you get to know yourself as well, because I think
Mm,
that that time alone taught me of the person that I want to be. So I've been very intentional about then the message that I want to put out, where I want to be online, especially in terms of working in marketing, because the more I get to know me and what I want to stand for, the more I'm like, actually, there's some of this stuff that I will drain myself for the sake of knowing that one person's going to hear that message and it's going to resonate, or do you know what, this really isn't worth it right now. Let me
mm,
leave that right now. And I think, especially living in Belfast and being around Northern Ireland, there is so much that is positive that when you look at when people went for the riots and you looked at the picture like with a drone and you looked at all these people that had gone as allies or whatever you want to call them versus the people that wanted to cause the trouble, it's such a minute number of people. So I do think as much as there's still so much negativity, there's a lot of positivity because there are people out there like you. There are people out there like me. There are people out there that do want to at least show that whilst it's imploding, there's still a chance to make things better for the next generation and the ones after that.
mhm. Yeah, 100%. Most people are sound and most people are brilliant. And I think a lot of people just don't know what to say, and they
Yeah,
don't know, like, it's a privilege to know how to navigate these spaces. But I think so. I am running a couple of workshops at the minute, and what I'm finding is people are like, we literally don't know what's right. Like,
yeah,
if I talk to my child about race, are they going to become racist?
yeah,
And it's like, oh, and it's creating the space for them to be able to say it and be like, well, I kind of get it, but here's the data, here are the facts. And actually, kids as young as I think, so at 3 months, they can differentiate between races.
wow,
And at 2 years, they will associate behavior with different races. And by
wow.
30 months, children and babies are making decisions based on race. That is why, and I will share the source with you actually. So it is really talking about it as soon as they're born, like
Yeah,
literally doing it. And I get why people are like, I totally understand it. So how can we support people to navigate that and really to have the conversations? And there was also studies that you can undo racial attitudes with children in as little as like a month, I think, but I would need to check that out. And so why don't we?
yeah,
Like, why
exactly.
don't we?
But I think the point that I was trying to make with all of that is as well, like in terms of representation, looking at where we fit as families and men and women and however you identify, because all of us we've all got things to learn. We're never done learning, but also just because you do things in a slightly different way in terms of how your family is, I think there's a lot of stigma around like what a conventional family looks like and how people are supposed to look and live and do things when actually, like I always say this to Jay as well, the Muslim family I grew up being really close to, I learned so much. Like I would identify as well as Catholic. And yeah,
Mm,
we talked about the Bible and the Quran and we talked about like the similarities. And that's what's got me in this deep dive of like Palestine and where everything came from as well. Because I was like, surely we all technically believe the same thing. So what is going on? And I didn't realize that there were so many politics behind all of that. So yeah.
never trust a colonizer. No. I mean, it's wild. I mean, it's money, it's power, and it's I can't get my head around it. I just cannot actually in that break there, I was just kind of looking through my phone and I was like, how is this still happening? And I think as humans and as mothers, whenever there's children
Mm,
who are experiencing stuff and that we're watching this live that is too shocking for a horror movie, not willing to show this in Hollywood, and yet
yeah,
they're willing to facilitate it in person.
yeah,
I think that's where the value of the work that we both do. and
Yeah.
the commitment that we both have in our values, in our mission, in our work, in our conversations, in our transparency
Yeah.
to keep going. And that's what keeps me going. And it's shit. But I think I do. And then I also realized that I actually started an intro to myself and went completely off piste and didn't even say what I do. So that was leading me to I'm founder of Still I Rise Diversity Storytelling, which is what I do.
I love
And
that.
that was
You know what? I hadn't even realised as well there because we got straight into. I
so
think
I
this is
know.
because you're also talking about, well, what can people do? And I think this podcast anyway, one, the reason it's not long is because it needs to be easily digestible. But two,
Oh yeah.
you have mentioned a lot of different resources and what you do. So one, people should reach out anyway if you've got questions. Like the DMs are always open. We'll post where you can find everything. But you also said about sharing resources with me. And that's the type of stuff that I'll look through and go, oh, look at what I'm learning. And it'll be posted on stories, it'll be posted online. So I do think that it's not that people don't have somewhere to start from because the work is already being done. And like you said before, there are good and bad people absolutely everywhere. And even when you look at, and that's my thing as well, of not always specifically picking out just one place, because you look at Sudan, Congo, all these places,
Yes.
colonialism, capitalism, that's what it all falls down to. Because even in Israel, there are people marching going, we don't want this. Like, we don't want children to be harmed and hurt and so on. So when you look at it on a normal level, if you can call it a normal level, like just a human level, people do not want this happening anyway. So what can we do? We can speak to each other, speak out about it, but also make people aware of the stuff that is going on. Because it's when G says to me, like, oh, what am I doing to live this life? And then there was a woman that was asking me about my ring the other day. And I'd said, I've never wanted lab diamond. I've never wanted diamond. I've always said either lab diamond or moissanite. And people are always like, oh, it's not diamond. And I'm like, look how it sparkles.
Yeah.
Exactly. But I'm like,
Yeah.
we should start doing it's the little things we do at home on a day-to-day basis that will make that change. Because I always look at it and go, I might not be able to change. It's not I can't. I might not be able to change the whole world around me, but I can change my own little world. And if we're being intentional about how we are living, how we are communicating, the doors that we're opening for the people, and that's again why I will go back and say, like, that's why I wanted you on this podcast, because I've known you for years and you have always been someone inspirational and really positive in my life. We don't need to talk all the time, but when I've needed you, you've been there. When I've had questions and I wanted to know things, and even when I was baking, like, you supported me in those types of way and being able to know that, like, I see Elliot, and it's so funny as well because there've been times where I've just like kind of walked past and being like, that must look so weird to some other random people because we don't. I know you, not that I know Elliot, and yet if I've seen him out and about, it'll just be a wave. I'm sure he's probably going, "Who is this woman? Like, what is going on?" But I do think how you live and how you emulate yourself, you specifically anyway, and how we have to do it as humans that's what I want to get across from this podcast. Because yes, we'll talk about other things, but I think it's just that thing of checking in. Like, what am I doing? Am I doing anything to educate myself, make things a little bit better, or speak to people? If I'm not, that's where you start.
Yeah, that's it. Like, that's it. And it's never too late. Like,
Yeah.
it's never, ever too late. So,
100%.
yeah, it's wild. It has been years, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And I'm so happy to have come on the podcast. I could literally do a million sessions with you because I feel like we just go straight in.
Yeah. I love it.
Really important. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
really important conversation. So I really appreciate the space and the platform
Oh,
because I just feel like I just wang on about the most annoying stuff
no,
all the
no.
time. And like, God love people around me. So I really love that you've held space.
Oh, do you know what? So well, I know our win of the week, and I actually think my
Mm.
win of the week is also realizing that there's a weight. I think sometimes it gets so deep and heavy that you forget that it's these conversations that do make a difference. Because for me at the moment, I think when I sit and check in at what I'm seeing, it can be very overwhelming. But my win is just being able to realize that on top of everything else that I'm doing, I am being intentional, but it's also that intentionality of the people that I choose to be around me and what they're doing in this world. Like, it's not on one specific person to change absolutely everything, but that's the whole point of, I think a lot of people are lonely at the moment because they're trying to find communities. And I'm looking around just going, actually, we're not alone. We've got people around us that, yes, our communities might not be someone that's right next to us. It's the people we choose to interact with online. It's the people we choose to talk to about some of these conversations. It's the people that hold that space for us. And that's incredible on its own, because Northern Ireland is changing, and in such a positive way, and will keep changing. And obviously there'll always be positives and negatives to those changes, but it's able to change because there'll be people like you that are raising kids as well, that you just go, you've done such a good job that other people feel safe and can just navigate walking down the street without having that anxiety of, I'm in a new place that I don't know and I'm really scared. So thank you for what you do as well.
Oh, stop. Thank you so much. That's it. No, that is it. Exactly. Communities are the way forward, and most people are great. I mean, I don't even like bad people. I don't even know. I think it's just people who are victims of a really, really shitty system.
Yeah.
And how can we understand, seek to understand? So yeah.
100%. So what would your win of the week be?
My win of the week is I released a workshop that had been, you'll know this as an entrepreneur, that had been thinking about for years. And then whenever the riots started, I was just going to loads of rallies, shouting, educating, like I didn't know what else to do. And I was like, do you know what? I'm going to offer a free workshop. They can make a donation to rebuild any of the communities, businesses, people who've been broken by white supremacists, essentially. And I did that, and it sold out in 2 hours. So I was like, I'll just do another one. Did another one, it sold out in 2 hours. And, we're halfway through it, and the impact has been incredible.
Yeah.
And that's all I want. Like, I just know that that's going to have a ripple effect, because it's women who look like me, who sound like me, who have my experience, but a lot on very different stages of their anti-racism journey. I'm not an expert. It's not anti-racism training at all. I'm never going to deliver that. I'm white, but it is raising anti-racist children, and it's all about our own bias, our own identity, our own privilege, how to talk to kids about race, and being an active bystander, the stuff we should be learning at school, and I've had to learn by having a black child. So that really gives me hope. That's my huge win, because now I have hope. And 2 weeks ago, everything was hopeless. It really was. So yeah, feel pretty good. I feel pretty positive about that.
I love that, but I also love that you were specific about the times, because within a couple of weeks, look at how big that change is, and this will always happen. They will have peaks and troughs. So even just that, to know that yes, whilst things might seem really negative, there will be a point where things do turn and things do feel like, okay, we're starting to get somewhere. So I love that. But
you'll also get this. Imagine committing to a workshop that you're starting 6 days later and it sells out. I was like, oh, I have a full-time job and I need to create this workshop. But I had it kind of all there anyway. And that's a privilege as well, having access to learn. I love creating all that stuff. So yeah, I feel hopeful, and I think it's brilliant talking to you. It really, really is. And your own experiences on here. And I love that you're here, and I love that she's here, and I can't wait for you to have babies. It's gonna be amazing.
Me too. One day. Oh, I love that. Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I'll share the other resources with me anyway, and I'll share those as well. But we've already got bits from you that we'll be sharing. And this should go out in a couple of weeks by the time people have seen it. So yeah, by then we'll probably have added to the list. But yeah, thank you so much for being on. Everyone keep liking, commenting, subscribing, leave your questions if you've got any, because like we said, there'll definitely be another one.
Do. Awesome. Thank you so much. Here, can I do a screen grab? Do you mind if I do that? Promote on my, okay, I'll just, so after 3, we will do something fun. 1, 2, 3. Yay, amazing.
Love it.
Okay, look, anything else I can do, please shout. And we've so much more to cover. So anytime I will make myself available to come back on, and enjoy your weekend. Enjoy the long weekend.
You too.